y'all, it is Nikki. Welcome back to the channel. So I'm just in like a story science mood lately. I don't know what it is. I feel like the past year has just been really productive writing wise, and like I've been experiencing a lot of good storytelling lately with the Rings of Power show, and now I'm working through the Wheel of Time book series, which I've been wanting to do forever, so this is just very exciting. And I'm having fun like breaking down those stories to see kind of how they work. I remember the first time I seriously picked up adult fantasy, I was just wowed by literally everything. Every unique idea was like, oh my goodness, how did they come up with this? Where does this come from? How do all these brilliant, never done before ideas come out of one author's head? But the more I kind of delved into the genre, the more I read of other authors too, the more I can say, thankfully today, that it takes more to fully wow me now than it did when I first started diving into fantasy. Because the thing is, the more time you spend with the genre, the more you start to recognize the like basic building blocks and tropes that are not generic in the genre, but like kind of universal. The whole idea of tropes is that they are building blocks of story that do get repeated story to story, but in new and creative ways. Like I remember Brandon Sanderson mentioning in his creative writing course that Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings and Moraine from the Wheel of Time series are pretty similar. And as soon as he said that, it was like, oh, true. They kind of are. Like they fulfilled the same story purpose, fulfill the same trope, even though they are two very different characters with different backstories and backgrounds and motives. They are both magic-wielding mentor figures. Kind of like, I want to say Brom from the Aragon series, but I can't say definitively because I never actually finished that series. I'll put it back on my list. Another example of this, to stick with the Wheel of Time theme, is in that series there is a dagger that is evil, and a character gets a hold of it, and as soon as he does, it starts to corrupt him and make him sick, which should sound familiar because that's basically the One Ring. And it's also kind of similar to a Horcrux, which also immediately starts affecting you negatively as soon as you start carrying it, Ron. Not to be confused with a similar trope, which is also an evil magical object, but one that is used to control people. That could maybe be the One Ring, but it's more like the Dark One Dagger from Once Upon a Time, Rumpelstiltskin's Dark One Dagger and Achilles' heel. I also have something sort of like that in one of my current projects. So those are two examples of like evil magical object tropes. Another one, the Oath Gates from the Stormlight Archive, the Way Gates from the Wheel of Time, and even when I really think about it, hyperspace in Star Wars. Those are all kind of part of one like magical transportation system trope, I would say. They're very different. They look completely different. The authors and creators like flesh them out in different ways, but they're fulfilling the same purpose. Like we as writers sometimes need our characters to get from A to B without having to cross 8 billion miles of our huge fantasy world. So you create a magical portal system that allows them to get from A to B really fast. So all of these are examples of like basic tropes that you see repeated from story to story to story, but in different ways that are individual to each story. And I struggled with this at first because it felt like I couldn't come up with anything original. Like I would have an idea and put it into a story and be so proud of it, and then read something and be like, what the beans? Like Robert Jordan has similar thing, but that was my idea. I came up with it. I hadn't even read Robert Jordan at this point. And it kind of tripped me up because you get in that spot where it's like, well, now what? Like, do I have to change it or scrap that or like rewrite? And had to realize with tropes, recycling happens. Like we're all using the same basic tools of the craft. Tropes are our tools. If you're doing the exact same thing with a trope that someone else is doing and it's just a carbon copy of someone else's character or plotline, yeah, readers are going to notice that and they're not going to be impressed. Our job is to use tropes that are kind of universal and are kind of generic, but make them new, make them fresh, dress them up in a way that fits within our story and is unique to our story. And either people will recognize your trope but still like it because you just did it in such a cool way, or you'll dress it up so well in new clothes, people won't even recognize the trope at first. Like me, I didn't recognize that Moraine was basically Gandalf. Breaking down stories this way has really helped me to figure out how they work and how they fit together. Kind of like taking something apart to see how it works. You could give me a screwdriver and a mechanical object in a lifetime and I probably wouldn't figure that out, but breaking stories down to figure out how they work, I am slowly getting better at that. And I'm coming to understand it's not my job to invent new tropes because I probably won't be able to do that. I think most of them are probably already floating out there somewhere. My job is to pick the ones that I want to use for my story and to reconfigure and dress them up in a way that will be new and will be individual to the story that I am creating. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to like and subscribe and comment below with a trope that you've used in a story and then found reflected in someone else's. That is all from me, but as always, do not forget to spend some time in the clouds today.